She's not coming, right? Let's not make this about her. That's what my mom whispered into her phone, thinking I wasn't on the line yet. But I was. I heard every word, and I knew right then and there that nothing had changed, even after everything. After years of silence, after years of sending flowers on her birthday, unsigned Christmas cards, quietly wiring money when Caitlyn got her first tuition bill, and Dad couldn't cover it right now. I was still the one they'd rather pretend never existed, but this time I wasn't going to disappear. The envelope came navy blue, gold trim, classy, military issue, addressed to the Doyle family, not Camryn, just family. Inside, Caitlyn's officer commissioning invitation, folded once, no photo, no note, except a line scrawled in my mother's thin cursive, please dress appropriately, don't embarrass your sister, no hope to see you, no thank you for your service. Just that. For most people that would sting. But for me it was just confirmation of what I already knew. That in my family's story I was a redacted chapter. I stared at the card over black coffee. No sugar, no cream, the kind of bitter you don't learn to love, you just get used to. It had been 11 years since I left West Point. On paper, it said I withdrew voluntarily. The truth? I was pulled into a classified ops program after a simulation I wasn't supposed to survive. My instructors said, you shouldn't be standing. But I was. They gave me a code name, Shadow Grid. 9 years, 0 public records, Delta Force, no medals, no funeral if I didn't come home, just silence. When I finally resurfaced, I sent 1 letter to my parents, no reply. That was the deal, I guess. I protected the nation, but I stopped being someone worth protecting in their eyes. Caitlyn, though, she stayed on the rails, played it safe, Cadet of the Year, news features, medals, perfect ponytail. She became the story my parents wanted to tell. My mum used to say, Caitlyn is what Camryn might have become if she hadn't quit. They never asked why I disappeared. They never wondered if I was okay. They just filled in the blanks with disappointment and moved on. Now Caitlyn was being commissioned, front row seats for the whole family, except me. The way my mum phrased it, don't embarrass your sister, wasn't a warning, it was a verdict. I wasn't invited as a veteran. I wasn't invited as a sister. I was tolerated as a risk. I could have ignored it. Thrown the card in the trash like every unsigned gift I sent that came back returned to sender. But something in me cracked, not from anger, just this quiet, bone-deep knowing. You don't get to erase me, not anymore. I wasn't going to wear the uniform, wasn't going to correct anyone, but I'd be there, in the room, watching, listening. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge stories aren't loud. They're just the ones where you refuse to vanish. I pulled out a plain grey blouse, pressed, no rank, no ribbons. I tucked my old Delta ring into my pocket, not to show, just to remember. A part of me hoped maybe, just maybe, someone would look back. That Caitlyn might catch my eye, smile. But deep down I knew they already decided who mattered, and I was just a ghost with a seat in the last row. To everyone watching, have you ever felt like someone edited you out of your own family? Like you gave them your strength, your loyalty, your silence, and in return they gave you nothing? Tell me below. I read every word. You're not invisible here. If this opening spoke to something deep in you, stick around. Because this isn't about revenge through rage. This is about showing up when they'd rather you didn't exist. And trust me, the ones who erase you, they never expect you to show up holding the truth. I walked into the ceremony early, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want the attention of being late. That's the trick when your own parents treat you like a ghost. You learn to glide in without sound, settle in the last row, and act like you were never really there. The room was a patriotic fever dream, red, white and blue bunting, metal polish shining, laughter that floated too high like everyone was auditioning for some recruitment ad. My mother stood by the front row, arms crossed like a drill sergeant. Dad nodded at officers like he was one of them. Caitlyn? Front stage, radiant, clean-cut, every inch of her screaming, "This is the daughter who made it." And me? Not even her shadow, more like the memory of one. I stayed in the back, pressed blouse, boots quiet on carpet. Nothing about me said, "Look at me." Everything about me said, "I don't need to be seen, but I won't be erased." As the guests filed in, I overheard 2 church ladies chatting behind me. Didn't their older daughter go to West Point too? One of them squinted toward the stage. "I think she dropped out. What a waste. Poor Mark and Linda." That one hit harder than I expected. Dropped out. That's the version they told people. Not classified recruitment, not risked her life to pull hostages out of enemy ground, just quit, just shame. The ceremony began. Caitlyn marched across the stage with precision, saluted, took her oath. My father beamed. My mother's face tightened with pride so sharp it could slice. Then Caitlyn spoke, confident, poised. "My father is a military engineer, my mother a code specialist, and my sister attended West Point." There was a pause, a beat. She looked toward the crowd, but not at me. She chose a different path. The silence that followed was surgical, not cruel, worse, calculated, deliberate, a clean amputation of truth. At the reception afterward, I approached the back of the room, not to mingle, just to be present. That's all I ever wanted, honestly. Not fanfare, not thanks, just acknowledgement that I existed. I sat at the end of a long banquet table near a cluster of officers. No one looked my way. Eventually, a woman in pearls, one of Mum's church friends, turned to me. "So, Reagan, what are you doing these days?" I opened my mouth. I didn't even get the first syllable out. "She's in admin," Caitlyn cut in with a light laugh. "Logistics, maps and stuff." They laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but just enough. Just enough to say, "Of course she is. Of course she's that." You ever been laughed at like that? Not the kind that stings right away, but the kind that echoes quietly in your spine. The kind where you smile out of reflex, but your chest goes hollow like you're watching your dignity fold itself up and walk out the room. Yeah, that kind. If you've ever been there, you don't forget that sound. And maybe, like me, you still remember every word that came after, every dismissive glance, "It's just a joke," every smile that cut sharper than a slap. If that's ever happened to you, you're not crazy. You're not soft. You're just someone who remembers. And trust me, the people who can forget that kind of moment, they've probably never had to survive it. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I just looked at Caitlyn. She didn't look back, but my mother did. She raised her glass, water, as always, and gave me the same tight, polished smile she gives strangers at galas, the kind of smile that says, "You're lucky we even let you in the door." I could have stood up and walked out. I didn't, because if I left now, it'd be just one more erasure they could call self-inflicted. So I sat there, still, present, quiet, letting every ounce of their silence try to break me. But here's the thing about people who've been left out of their own story. We learn to memorize the chapters no one else wants to read out loud. To anyone who's ever been laughed at and told to lighten up. To anyone who's been reintroduced like a footnote in their own family. You don't owe anyone a performance. You don't owe anyone a smile. And you sure as hell don't owe anyone an apology for just showing up. That's not weakness, that's survival. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. No need to say anything big, but if you want to, I want to hear it. Tell me, have you ever been called a loser at a dinner party? Later that night, I sat on the edge of my motel bed, hands still folded in my lap, like I was waiting for something. Not an apology, not recognition, just something. A glance, a pause, a single word that might have said you mattered too, but it never came. On the table beside me sat a small photo frame I'd packed in my bag. 4 people, Mum, Dad, Caitlyn and me. Only now the version Mum kept on the piano had 3. They'd cropped me out,
Literally, I saw it last year when a cousin sent me a picture of their Christmas setup. Same frame, same smiles, just no Camryn. They'd removed me from the family timeline like it was a group photo they wanted symmetrical, like I made it unbalanced, like my presence, my survival, was something shameful. And the wildest part, I understood. Not agreed, but understood. Because when your family builds its pride on a single narrative, they don't leave room for unapproved chapters. And I was the unapproved chapter, West Point dropout to them. Embarrassing older sister, admin work, maps and logistics, not a soldier, not a hero, just a wrinkle in their polished record. Never mind that I bled for this country. Never mind that I still hear the radio chatter of a mission that never made it into any history book. Shadow Grid, that was the name of the op. 9 of us went in, 5 made it out, and not a single one of us got to tell the story, because the story didn't belong to us. It belonged to silence, to national security, to the classified bin where names go to disappear. I didn't cry that night. I didn't even flinch, but I did dig through my bag and pull out the only letter I'd kept. Nate's letter. He wrote it the night before the mission. His handwriting uneven, rushed. If I don't make it, remember, honor doesn't need applause. It just needs someone to carry it when nobody's looking. Nate didn't make it. I carried his memory with me every day after that. But it was my name they buried, not his. My parents never asked what happened after I left West Point. Not once. Never asked why I didn't come home for Christmas, why my phone went silent, why I sent gifts without return addresses, why my hair was shorter, my eyes heavier. They just filled in the blanks with whatever made them feel better. And Caitlyn, she never called, never wrote. She stood at family events, took pictures, laughed at Mom's jokes about the one who left, and smiled like there wasn't a space at the table that used to be mine. There's something about being erased that changes you. You start to second-guess your own memories. Did I really graduate top of my class at West Point? Did Dad actually cry when I took my oath? Did Mom ever hang my letter of appointment on the fridge? Or did I just imagine all of that? Sometimes you start wondering if maybe, just maybe, you really did fail, and then you open a drawer and find a wrinkled field report signed by 3-star brass with your name at the bottom, and you remember, no, they just couldn't handle your truth. So they replaced it with silence. That's the part they never talk about in revenge stories. It's not always fire and fury. Sometimes it's just surviving long enough for your name to resurface in rooms where you were once a dirty word. The next morning, I put on the same grey blouse, brushed the wrinkles out with my palm, looked in the mirror, didn't fix my hair, didn't put on makeup, didn't need to prove I was polished. I was here. I was breathing. I still had Nate's letter. I still had my ring. I still had the truth. And the truth, it was louder than anything they'd say behind my back. To anyone who's ever been edited out of a photo, a story, or a family tree, you didn't disappear. They just stopped looking. That's not on you, that's on them. The reception hall buzzed with a hollow kind of celebration, smiles stretched too wide, laughter that didn't touch the eyes. I stood near the back, same pressed blouse, same worn boots. Nothing had changed outwardly. But inside, I wasn't waiting anymore. I was watching. I had no seat at the family table, and honestly, I didn't need one. I just needed to be there when the truth finally walked in, and it did. The doors swung open with a sharp burst of air. Boots struck the marble floor, hard, measured. I didn't look right away. I didn't have to. I could feel the shift in the room, the way conversation dropped mid-sentence, how posture straightened, how heads subtly turned. That presence, I knew it, even after all these years. Darren Coles, now a lieutenant colonel. Last I saw him, he was bleeding through his side in the back of a Black Hawk over Mosul. He wasn't supposed to make it, but there he was, clean-cut, metal sharp. He scanned the room with the instinct of a man who's had to assess danger too many times. And then his eyes found me. He stopped, right in the middle of movement, in the middle of everything. "Ma'am!" His voice cut through the room like a blade. Not loud, not angry, just certain. "Ma'am, you're the Army General." You could have heard a pin drop. You could have heard a breath catch in my mother's throat. My father froze. The fork in his hand trembled slightly before he set it down. My mother's glass, crystal of course,
Slipped. It didn't shatter. It just cracked. Hairline fracture. Perfectly fitting, like her image of me, cracked, but still pretending to hold. Caitlyn's hand hovered mid-air, napkin inches from her mouth, her eyes wide. I stayed still. Didn't smile. Didn't rise. Let them sit in it. Let the silence finally speak louder than their curated versions of me ever could. Darren stepped forward. This woman led Shadow Grid. She pulled 4 of us out alive when Command had already written us off. She's the reason I can stand here in this uniform, in this life. She didn't lose a single soldier she could have saved. We owe her everything. He said it like it was a fact, because it was, but also because it was overdue. The room rustled. Whispers cracked across the air like dry branches. The name Camryn Doyle passed from mouth to mouth like a secret someone just realised had weight. I didn't flinch. I reached into my shoulder bag, pulled out a Navy folder, stamped Department of Defence, Strategic Programme Funding. I stepped forward, just enough to reach the table, set it down gently between my father's wine glass and Caitlyn's untouched salad. $4.2 million in special funding approved last month for Caitlyn's leadership training program, based on strategic designs I authored, the same framework Caitlyn's using now. I wrote the original while deployed, but don't worry, my name's not on the public file. I know how much you value appearances. My father's jaw locked. My mother didn't say a word. She just stared at the folder like it had teeth. Caitlyn whispered, barely audible. Why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at her, not with anger, with a question of my own. Would you have believed me? She didn't answer, didn't need to. The answer sat between us, thick, unsaid. I turned to Darren, gave him the smallest nod. You made it home. That's what matters. He placed his hand over his heart, then turned and left the way he came. No applause, no salute, just truth, dropped like a stone in a still pond. The room stayed quiet. No one knew what to do with me now, not as a daughter, not as a soldier, but as someone they couldn't pretend away anymore. And you know what? That silence, it was the most honest reaction my family had ever given me. To anyone who's ever been talked over, rewritten, renamed, erased, sometimes you don't need to raise your voice. You just need to survive long enough for the truth to walk in on its own 2 feet. Let them choke on the version of you they refuse to believe. Let their silence be the applause they never gave you. The party didn't recover. Sure, the music kept playing. The staff kept passing mini quiches on silver trays. People kept sipping champagne. But the soul of the room? Gone. Replaced with the echo of what had just happened, of what they had just heard. No one laughed anymore. No one looked at me the same. Some avoided my eyes. Others watched me the way you'd study a landmine someone just discovered under the dinner table. Not dangerous, but undeniable. I walked outside for air. Didn't say a word to anyone, didn't need to. The night was cool, quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, but before the truth fully settles. Footsteps followed. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Caitlyn. She stood behind me, arms crossed over her new uniform, unsure if she should speak. Eventually, she did. Why didn't you ever tell me? Her voice was smaller now, no command in it, no calculated warmth. Just a sister, asking. I turned slowly, met her eyes. Would you have believed me? She didn't answer, not right away, because she knew. She wouldn't have. She'd been fed a version of me so long, so consistently, that the truth, even now, face to face, felt foreign. She stepped closer, looked down at my hand. That ring, it's real, isn't it? I pulled the black Delta Force ring from my pocket, held it in my palm, open between us. They gave it to me after Shadow Grid, only thing I brought back that didn't need to be redacted. She exhaled, shaky, eyes glistening. All those years, I thought you left us. I nodded, slow, painfully. That's what they told you. She stared past me for a while, like if she looked hard enough, she'd see our entire childhood playing in the dark, us in the backyard,
Her running after me with scraped knees, me teaching her how to lace her boots the army way, even when hers were just pink sneakers. That little girl used to salute me. Then she stopped. Because Mom told her I quit. "I used to pray you'd come back," she whispered. "But when you didn't, I thought maybe you were ashamed." "I wasn't," I said. "But I figured it was easier for everyone if I stayed quiet, not for me." Her voice cracked on the last part. She blinked fast, swallowed hard. "You gave up everything, and I never even said thank you." "You didn't know. I didn't ask." Silence settled again. This time it didn't hurt, it just hovered. "Did they know?" she asked, almost afraid to say it. "No," I replied. "Not really. They didn't want to." "And now?" "Now they'll pretend they did," I said flatly. "Or they'll say it was exaggerated, or that I shouldn't have brought it up during your moment." Her brow furrowed. "But you didn't. Darren did." "Exactly. That's the only reason it's real to them now, because someone in a uniform said it out loud." We stood in silence for a beat longer. Then I reached into my pocket again, pulled out a folded envelope, handed it to her. She looked at it, confused. "What is this?" "Your scholarship package, the one you got when you were 17. "I already have that." "Not this version." She opened it. Inside was a letter, unsigned, but stamped with the original Department of Defense endorsement. The donor line said, "Anonymous, referred by C. Doyle." "You?" I nodded. "Dad said it came from the academy." He lied. She looked stunned, eyes scanning the paper, mouth slightly open. "Why would you do that? After everything, after what they said?" "Because I knew you'd go far," I said quietly, "and because I wanted at least one of us to be allowed to be proud in public." She didn't respond, didn't need to. Her tears said everything. "I don't know how to fix this," she said finally. "Any of it." "You don't have to," I replied. "Just don't rewrite it." We walked back inside together, the noise of the reception fading as we stepped through the doors. Our parents were still at the table. Mum's arms were crossed. Dad pretended to check email. Neither looked at me. But when Caitlyn sat down, she didn't look at them either. She looked at me, and this time she didn't look away. After a few minutes, I rose, walked to the exit. As I passed their table, I stopped. Just once. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't make a scene. I looked at Mom and said, "If today embarrassed you, good. It means you still feel something." Then I walked out. To everyone who's ever been made to feel like a burden just for surviving, you didn't break the family. You broke the version of it that couldn't handle your truth. And that's not betrayal. That's bravery. It had been 3 weeks since the reception hall showdown. 3 weeks since Darren Coles stood up, spoke the truth, and watched my family crumble in their own silence. 3 weeks of reporters calling Caitlyn about strategy briefings. 3 weeks of family texts left unopened on my phone. And 3 weeks of me wondering if I'd finally be allowed back into the story they'd redacted. That morning, I stepped off the elevator at the Pentagon Summit Hall, wearing the same plain grey blouse and boots I'd donned for Caitlyn's commissioning. No rank insignia, no medals. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't need them to be seen. I carried only my Delta Force ring in my pocket and the quiet knowledge that I was exactly where I belonged. The Summit Hall was a grand vaulted room lined with portraits of generals and flags from every branch of service. Rows of seats stretched toward the stage where a large screen displayed Strategic Leadership Summit in bold letters. I could hear murmurs as I found a spot in the back. A mix of civilian contractors, uniformed officers, and a handful of senior brass who'd flown in for Caitlyn's keynote. My heart thumped, not from nerves but anticipation. I remembered how it felt to step onto a crystal-cut stage under floodlights, every eye trained on you. Back then, I craved that spotlight. Now I craved something different, to witness a rightful recognition unfold without stealing it for myself. Caitlyn's name was announced before she appeared. A hush fell over the crowd as she walked onto the stage in full service dress, medals pinned, eagle glinting on her collar.
She paused at the podium, scanned the audience, and took a slow breath. My father, seated 3 rows ahead, leaned forward. My mother sat rigid, lips pressed. I wondered if they felt that familiar tug, that guilt-heavy ache, knowing their own daughter was about to upend the narrative again. Caitlyn cleared her throat. She spoke with crisp confidence. "Good morning. When I was little, I thought applause meant you were good. I thought medals meant you mattered." She paused, and I felt the air shift. Not a single person in that hall dared to interrupt. Caitlyn looked out as if seeing the room for the first time, her eyes gliding over faces that had once ignored her sister's existence. "I believed those things because that's what I was taught. That your value came from what everyone saw, your ribbons, your commission, your public record." She let the words hang. I recognised her cadence, measured, deliberate, her own version of silence before impact. A silence built over years of knowing something was missing. "But I was wrong." Those 2 words echoed like thunder. A ripple passed through the crowd, a slight lean forward, a blink held too long. Caitlyn reached into her left pocket and retrieved a folded card. She unfolded it with gentle reverence. This credit line read, C. Doyle, Strategic Program Funding, $4,200,000 approved. I saw it on my desk last week and realised the designs I'm presenting today came from my sister. The very framework I'm using to train new officers was drawn by her hand in the dirt of a forward operating base under mortar fire, classified, redacted, and buried where no family member bothered to look. She looked directly at me, my camouflaged ring catching the light as I slid my hand into view. The silence was absolute. No rustling of papers, no coughs, just the weight of her words filling the room. Then Caitlyn did something no one expected. She stepped away from the podium. Not down the stairs, not into the crowd. She walked straight to the centre aisle. I watched her boots click on the polished floor, each step a soft drumbeat of resolve. Every eye in the hall pivoted. I saw real-time astonishment. Jaws dropped, eyes widened, officers nudging each other with open questions in their gaze. Mum's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's knuckles whitened on his chair arm, and in that instant I understood the depth of her courage. She wasn't just saluting me, she was saluting the truth they'd refused to honour for decades. When Caitlyn reached me, she paused. I was standing, surprise rising in my chest. Though I'd meant to remain seated, I straightened, but didn't move. She snapped to attention, right hand raised in a crisp, full salute. "Attention!" She held the salute for a beat that stretched into eternity, then released. The gallery sat in stunned silence. A single second turned into 2, then 3. Then, as if someone exhaled the hold on a collective breath, other officers began to rise from their seats. 1 by 1, 2 by 2, each extending their own salute. No words, no clamour, just a wave of respect rolling forward like a tide. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I remembered Nate's letter. Honour doesn't need applause. It just needs someone to carry it when nobody's looking. And in that moment, I carried every ounce of honour I'd earned. No audience required. Caitlyn turned and walked back to the podium, placed my salute in the centre of everything they'd built, and resumed her address. Thank you, Camryn Doyle, for showing me that true leadership isn't always visible. It isn't in headlines or medals displayed behind glass. It lives in the quiet conviction that when you show up, without asking for credit, you change lives. She spoke the last line into the microphone, her voice thick with emotion. Then she stepped away as if yielding the room back to its purpose, but the purpose had changed. The summit continued with technical briefings, data slides, combat scenarios, partnership agendas, but nothing resonated like that silent moment of recognition. I slipped away once Caitlyn concluded, stepping through the side exit into a corridor lined with uniformed officers and civilian advisors. I expected nods, maybe a word or two.
Instead, I got something better. A woman in a suit, someone's chief of staff, touched my arm gently. I just wanted to say, that was incredible. I had no idea. Thank you. Thank you, I replied, voice low. You owe my sister more of that than me. She smiled, patted my shoulder, and walked off. That brief exchange felt like 1,000 pieces of acknowledgement I'd never received from home. Later, I found Caitlyn in a smaller antechamber. She'd changed back into civilian clothes, hair loose, her face radiant with relief. She was holding something small, a dark blue box with a silver clasp. Open it, she said. You first. Inside lay a pair of gold oak leaves, her rank insignia as a major, and a folded note. You carried this rank in my shadow for years. Now let me carry it in public, for both of us. I held up the insignia, feeling its weight. They were hers, but they felt like mine too. I pressed them to my chest, and Caitlyn pulled me into a hug that felt like a lifeline. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. Weeks later, a single photograph began circulating quietly through internal army channels, a candid shot of me in a briefing room, a strategy map behind me, hand raised, not in salute, but pointing at objectives on the board. On that hand, the black Delta Force ring gleamed. No caption, no credits, just an image that spoke volumes. Occasionally I'd hear from someone I served with, I saw you in Washington today, proud of you. Or from a junior officer, you changed the way I think about leadership. And while I didn't crave the spotlight, those messages reminded me that this kind of victory, tone deaf to applause, deaf to silence, was the quietest, strongest kind there is. To everyone watching, have you ever carried a truth so heavy that silence felt safer than speaking it? Have you ever waited years for someone to honour what you did, only to realise you didn't need their permission to matter? Drop a in the comments if you've ever stood in the back row, unrecognised and still refused to vanish. If you've ever witnessed someone you love finally refuse to be erased, share their story below. Because some of the loudest victories, the ones that change lives, happen in the perfect silence of a salute. If this chapter spoke to you, subscribe and share with someone who needs to see that honour isn't always in applause. Sometimes it lives in how you show up when nobody's looking. Thanks for watching, and remember, your truth matters even when they try to rewrite your story.